I have a board. If you're a board member, please raise your hand. We've got a couple of them here. A couple of still are on the way. The traffic apparently on I-15 is pretty bad. But we have really, really tried to work so hard to get people here. So I appreciate all of you so much for taking the time to be here. Thank you so much. We work hard to make a difference in our community, but it doesn't mean anything if we don't have people that come and want to learn about things that are really important. So we're going to start with an opening prayer before I say any more, and Ben Booth is going to give our opening prayer.
Heavenly Father, we're thankful that we can meet here tonight. We're thankful for our speaker who has come to share pertinent information with us, and we ask you to bless him in delivering these things to us. We pray for those who might be on their way to attend, that they will arrive safely. We pray that we as an organization and as freedom-loving patriots can continue to flourish and to promote principles of freedom and constitutional principles, and we pray that we can be successful in doing so. We ask thee to watch over us while we're met. We thank thee for all of thy blessings, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's Peter Cannon, one of our board members. When I say the Pledge of Allegiance, I try to teach everybody, when we get to the part where we say one nation under God, rather than having a pause in between those two words, to say one nation under God. I think that's the way really it's meant to be said. All right, so once again, I want to just thank you so much for coming tonight. It means so much. My goal is to fill this room, and we need your help. We are all about informing you about concepts or things that you are not going to find anywhere else. And frankly, there's a lot of things that are happening that should be on the news that are not on the news. And these concepts are not taught in schools. So really, this is a great place to bring your family, your friends, and I'm asking you to put on your calendar the second and fourth Thursdays of every month at 6:30 p.m. right here. Sometimes there's a little bit of a caveat, like I think the second Thursday in September, we're going to be in the building in the back because they have a conference going on here. The fourth Thursday in November and December, we take off. And July, we take off as well. But I want to thank you all. So I want to just tell you a little bit about the Davis County Conservatives really quick. We are, 5 years old, I think. We have three purposes. One is our community forums, which is to educate people. The second one is to find people to run for elected office. And the third is to mobilize people. So some examples of mobilization would be if someone's running a campaign and needs help putting up signs, or there's a rally that's going on that we need people to come to that rally. We want to have a database where we say, this is going on, it's really important, please show up. Because the truth of the matter is that it's up to us, to save our nation, to protect our freedoms, and just like Ronald Reagan said, I'm going to totally mess it, freedom is only one generation away from being lost. And it really is true. And our children are not being set up to carry the torch. They're just not. So if we don't step up, if we don't get involved, we're going to lose everything. We have everything to lose. So there's my little soapbox and my little lecture, and you're all sitting here. I'm talking to the choir. So my invitation to you is to show up the next Thursday, which will be 2 weeks from today. And on that night, we're going to be talking about AI. And this is a topic that everybody needs to know about. We have a really well-informed speaker. We'll also be talking about transhumanism and some of the other weird things that are going on that you need to be aware of and your families need to be aware of. So I want to ask, how many are here for the first time? Wow. Okay, I want to ask a couple of questions to kind of understand those who are new. How many of you are from Weber? Okay, so we've got the Weber people, and we want to combine efforts, so we want you guys to keep coming. We don't think everybody needs to reinvent the wheel, and you're close to us. Well, I don't want to destroy your meeting, but you're more than welcome to come. Ben? No. Email list.
Reminded about these things. You can fill out your contact information on that clipboard. We'll pass it around.
Yeah. Brian is stuck in traffic. His car battery died. He had to get it replaced, so that's why he's not here yet. So yes, when you see the clipboard go around, please put your name on it, especially if you're new. If you'd give us your email and your phone number, we'd really appreciate it because we send out text reminders as well. Also, we will have a donation bucket. If you feel like putting a couple dollars in, that's helpful because we do have some minor expenses. Okay, where was I? So some other examples of mobilization would be like the flag referendum, where we were gathering signatures for the flag. There's lots of reasons to be involved. And so this is a great place to come and find out about those things. Now, I do want to tell you about a couple of things. One is the Freedom's Light Festival. Who knows about Freedom's Light Festival? Okay. I'm going to pass this flyer around. There's one for everyone. Please take it. This is an amazing, amazing event. It's colonial period come to Bountiful City Park. People dress up as different characters. They tell stories. It's absolutely amazing. Raise your hand if you don't know about Freedom's Light Festival. Okay, so a lot of you do, not a lot of you don't. So we'll just pass around, and if you already know, take one, give it to a neighbor. A great place to take families. Secondly, this is unrelated, but I am doing a honey, raw unfiltered honey group order. If any of you are interested in participating in that group order, it's a gallon of honey for $46. It's honey from Wyoming. Just let me know before you leave tonight, and I can get you that information. It is closing soon, though. Lastly, are there any homeschoolers in this group? Okay. I have a couple of flyers that I'll hand to you. Anybody else besides right here? Okay. All right. I am done talking and stalling for more people to show up. But tonight we have our speaker, Enoch Moore, who's going to be talking on nullification. And I'm just going to turn right over to him. He does Defending Utah. You can find Defending Utah on YouTube. They have some videos there that you can watch, and I'll just let him tell more about that. So we thank you so much, Enoch, for coming. He came from Draper. It took him an hour and 45 minutes. So there's bad traffic today. So thank you so much for coming, Enoch.
Thank you, Tina, very much. I'm gonna just slide this over here because I have to reach the power. Yeah. Okay, let's see, everyone, let's position that right. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Tina. I guess I'm gonna go through this presentation. I had to figure out the tech a little bit, so hopefully we'll stay in sync here because we don't have a live feed to that, but hopefully that's all going to work out. So again, my name is Enoch Moore, and I am the founder of Defending Utah, and I'm just going to give you a quick introduction first. But first, let me give this disclaimer. I consider myself a fellow truth seeker. We're all just searching for truth, and I feel strongly about the ideas in this presentation, and I'll stand behind them, but I humbly reserve the right to improve as well, and as we all continue to learn together. Okay, so a little bit about me. So I started Defending Utah in 2013. There was an organization that stood on the fact that the Constitution is inspired by nature's God and must be preserved. It had a kind of a JBS foundation. I feel like Robert Welch had some of the best foundational principles in restoring our nation. Had a statewide local activist network with strong activity, all ages. And I kind of see Defending Utah initially the first 10 years as my time to try everything. Everything you could think of to restore freedom. All the ideas that have ever come up, I just tried to execute and use what energy I could get from volunteers and those involved and our members and try everything. So I learned a lot from those experiences. On my website, there's 460 articles. I wrote 225 of them, all addressing problems and solutions in our nation, but mostly in Utah, related to liberty. After 2022, I really refocused Defending Utah on solutions only, little less, journalism and exposing all the horrible things that are wrong, and focusing on what we do about it. And then in 2019, I started the American Committees Association, where I provide mentorships to organizations around the nation, the leaders in general, on how to build organizations from the ground up that preserve the Constitution in their communities. Okay, so my goals today are to remind you some things that you already know. I know this is the right crowd for liberty, and so there's definitely things you already know. But I hope to also teach you some new things, maybe say the same old basic things in new ways that click a little deeper, and also to empower you with some new tools. And especially there was a county commissioner that came here, right? And that's great because our local representatives need to understand nullification because it is a powerful tool and we are not powerless. But I've seen it regularly over the years, and especially in the last few years, where it's just an understanding of this tool that keeps you from using it. Okay, why we teach. So I love this quote from Thomas Jefferson: "The qualifications for self-government in society, they are not innate. They are the result of habit and long training." So you don't pick them up just because you get excited about America on the 4th of July and then you want to, vote. That's a great place to start, and nothing wrong with that, of course. But the founders knew they studied hard. They learned principles and they practiced applying them. And they're not natural, but once you get them, you can become really good at them. Okay, so local communities must learn to preserve the republic. This is where we are at in America today. Things have to be local. The problems that we're facing are that individuals who don't like our Constitution, they are changing our form of government, and they are doing it very methodically and specifically. And it's not a secret what they're doing. And if you get involved in government, you may get invited into various non-governmental, quasi-governmental entities, and they're changing how we are governed. And right now we kind of have two systems in the same place. And So that's one of the problems we have. And often government fails to follow the law. So the side of the government that is still under our constitutional framework, they often fail to even follow that framework. So the solution to all of this is nullification. It's kind of the bottom line when you take all the noise and you just narrow it down. Nullification is what we need to understand, and it encompasses a lot of things. So another way to understand nullification is it is enforcement of the constitutions. Okay, so I want to review a little bit of a foundation first, okay, about natural law. Natural law is something that doesn't come from a legislature. It is discovered. It requires putting pieces together. So that's why I use this puzzle piece. If you want to know the laws of Utah, you can read the legislative website. But if you want to understand the laws of nature, there's no place to go to read them. You have to think about them and observe them, and then they click. And then that is knowledge that can't be taken from you once you understand and you see something. Okay? So legislative law, that often sometimes called positive law, can be blindly obeyed. But natural law must be understood and applied. So it's a science. Observe, think, discuss. Discovery is a group effort. Question already? Yeah? Do I add it? Those are related concepts, for sure. The natural law comes from nature's God. Correct. Yeah. Yeah, they're not the same thing, but yes, they're definitely connected. Absolutely. And some other slides here, I bring that up, actually. So it might be a natural law if you can observe it's likely true repeatedly. So this is the process of discovery. And you can honestly defend that it's true consistently over time. So just think of gravity. If you never heard of gravity before, right? It's a scientific principle, but it's a natural law. You have to hear it once from somebody, and then you have to kind of observe, yeah, it seems to always work. And eventually, when it's challenged a few times, it starts to become obvious to you. The founders of our nation studied these concepts, and they didn't make them up. They got them from history. The Greeks and the Romans and many wise people throughout time that had thought through these things in great detail as they saw governments rise and fall. And the founders wanted to learn from history, all of that. And we are blessed to inherit the effort that they put in. So how many natural laws are there? The answer is just like inalienable rights, they cannot be numbered. Understanding natural law is a permanent paradigm shift. It is not a one-time event. Okay, it is about changing the way you think about how things work. When you think there's a problem, do you run and say, well, maybe they just need to write a new law and they'll fix this? Or is there a natural law playing out in front of us all the time? Are there many natural laws? And of course, there are many. Okay, so take away from that section, a natural law is as constant as any other scientific law. Okay, so a little bit of a mindset shift. I love this quote from George Washington. Government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. And force, like fire, is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. This is not just an interesting, cute thing that he said, but it is deep imagery to help us actually understand our government and our involvement with it. So here's a couple cartoons I created. So 2 campfires. On the left side there, you have a republic with a culture of nullification. And on the right side, you have any other form of government. Absolutely any other form that is not a republic ultimately turns into that. Fire. It is a dangerous servant. So you can see on the left, there's boundaries. It's a pleasant experience. You feed it a little bit to kind of keep it going. You have to understand how it works. But if you don't pay attention to it, it becomes like on the right. It becomes something to fear. It's out of control. This is the imagery we can keep in mind when we as you start thinking about what I'm going to teach you about nullification. Okay, so the default assumption in most of the world is that law is something that rulers make, and everyone below the rulers has to follow them. So if someone applied this to America, they would think, oh, we have a ruler, so I got Lincoln there with a crown, right? No different than a king. He makes all the rules, or him and his buddies, and everything top down, right? It's a top-down approach. This is how most of the world is, and this is how most people assume government functions. Okay, but that model ignores natural law. In the beginning, nature's God gave man his rights from the day we were created. Even if you're not biblical or Christian, I speak to a variety of groups, you can observe it's obvious, even those who would be atheists would say, well, I can have morals. Because, there are human rights and we should defend human rights. Well, why? You make them justify that. Well, because I'm human, because I exist. And oftentimes they can understand, I think this is what the founders meant. We are products of nature. And whatever you call that, whatever created nature, it obviously wasn't the government that didn't exist, so many years ago, whatever country you're in. Because we're products of nature, something created nature was here before us. And so we are saying that intrinsically to us, we have rights. So the rule of law is, this is different in America, and I don't quite have the animations up there, but that's okay. So in the United States of America, we have this new idea that law is not something that comes top down. It's something that our representatives at all levels make limited to the instructions that we give them. So God gave us our rights from the rights that he granted to us there. And actually, we're still on the previous slide. Let's see, let's go back. Another one. Okay, I'm staying on this slide for a second. So God gave us our rights. We took those rights as human beings and we wrote this document. We made the rules, and then we gave those rules to all layers of government. So we do not have a king. In fact, we are the kings in America. That is the whole point of this nation. The new system of government where we become kings. Have you ever heard of, I know you've heard, when we talk about the King of Kings. In my view, this has a lot to do with freedom in a nation where we all have learned to live as kings over our own family and our posterity. But if we live with the assumption of the previous way of thinking, that there is one top-down, one king, there is not a nation of kings for our king to inherit. My opinion there. Okay, so, but that is what makes that nice little campfire. Okay? So, you can go to the next slide. So, God gave law to the people through Moses. This is actually a biblical concept that the rulers are limited by law. Deuteronomy 17 says, he shall write him a copy of this law, and he shall read therein all the days of his life. So the government representative of ancient Israel had to read the law all the days of his life so that he would fear the Lord in this case. But our founders often talked about government should fear the people. What if our representatives had to read the Constitution every single day that they were in office? That'd be a nice place to start, wouldn't it? The founders took a lot of these ideas, like I said, from history, but a lot from ancient Israel. I got some fun presentations on that for another day. Okay, so so now we can go to the next slide. So following the rules under the previous assumption, when you have a king, that's easy. You just obey rules. You don't have to think about them. That happens in the United States a lot, where people don't understand the law, and so administrative law is something that we hear about a lot, where the executive branch pretends to write law, even though they don't have the authority to do it. Those rules in the executive branch apply to the executive branch employees, or they can kind of govern how they execute the laws in their own agency, but it has nothing to do with us. They can't write a law that we have to obey. But if we just obey things blindly, that's easy. It's a lot harder to learn the difference between right and wrong, to actually voice and claim our rights, to defend our neighbors when they're being oppressed by something that is unjust. That takes more work. It's interesting that there are court cases that talk about you must invoke a right before someone has to honor it. Of course, that's silly in a way, but it's a precedent in the courts where if you don't use your voice, it has a lot to do with nullification. If you don't use your voice, your rights don't exist. The law doesn't exist. The Constitution doesn't exist. If somebody is not speaking to it and explaining it correctly, by the way, because you've studied it, it might as well not exist. Okay, and then let's go to Constitution is a contract. So when we took our rights and we wrote down this thing called the Constitution, we created a contract. Okay, you are the author of that contract. You have to understand and believe that and own that for nullification to work. You are the author through inheritance. Our founding fathers gave it to us. We inherited that. You created the government and you set the rules. The government provides a service under that contract. Those serving in government, they agreed to it. You are the lawgiver claiming authority from God. It's in the law. So takeaway, a constitution, not just but any constitution, the state constitution, if another nation tried to establish a constitution, it is a contract between the people and the government. Nullification is a tool to enforce any contract. What do you do if your cell phone bill's wrong? You get on the phone and you say, I didn't order that, right? You're enforcing a contract. You're saying, hey, you can't do that. And, in that situation, it's usually on accident, that maybe there's a billing mistake or whatever. But if you don't use your voice, a billing error or them changing the rules on you, that's going to stand. Other people who don't like the Constitution can change the rules, and it will stick if we don't voice the other side, if we don't enforce and speak to it. Okay, and another takeaway, living with your rights is more work than living in blind obedience. It's unfortunate, but I think that has a lot to do with us becoming something greater and building this nation into what it was destined to become. So, next slide. Government not following the law. Does that really happen? No. Congress has a constitution problem. Many don't understand the document. This was a Washington Times article in 2013. I don't really need to find 1,000 articles to prove that there's a problem. I don't think anyone of any political stripe really questions that. So, how do we fix this? How do we fix this out of control fire? Sure.
I've always had trouble with this idea that many of them don't understand the Constitution. I contend they do understand it.
I definitely say there are a fraction of them that do, and they maliciously use that against us,
So once they
I
get
think.
to an
But
elected position, especially at the national level, they're not that ignorant.
well, I would contend that we as a people are pretty ignorant, even the best of us. This is the cream of the crop in this room. We're the people that care and are interested, and we still fall short. And our representatives are a product of that culture. So I do think there are some that are very well versed in it, and that's how they're very careful to get around it, so they have plausible deniability. They follow it sort of while technically, getting away with something. But there is definitely a large portion that they just get into politics. They don't really study it. They don't know their power. I think you get a mix.
That's very
Yeah.
kind and generous of you to say that. contend their motives are different. It's not that they don't
Sure.
understand it, they don't want to follow it. They gotta find
I don't
their own
disagree with what
path.
you're saying. There is an organized combination that knows it and figures that out. But at the local level, people get into politics all the time that just jump in. Their buddy in the business networking group, they had a random interest, and they get into office, and they're in the city council for 4 years, and then they leave. Right? There's a lot of these kinds of people.
At the lower level.
And that's really all that matters, which is some things one of my points here. The local level is where we restore the Constitution, absolutely. Where it becomes irrelevant what's happening at the national level or just top down, right? It starts the bottom up where we start enforcing it. Yep. Question?
The effect of these government officials following the Constitution is found in this Freedom Index, where out of our 100 senators, 46 of them have a rating of from 0 to
Right.
11%.
Yeah.
46%.
Freedom Index is a great tool that the John Birch Society does, yeah. And ultimately, when we get into nullification, once you understand this and you understand the local level, it becomes less and less important what is happening in Washington, D.C. You can create a town or a few towns or a county is absolutely a paradise for the Constitution, no matter how corrupt the higher levels are. Now, you can create, it still matters up there, but you got to start local. You can't change the top unless we have a lot of local movement in this, and it starts with one town at a time, and I've got some examples of that as well. But how we fix this? Okay, next slide. Would this be a good idea? The U.S. Department of Constitution Enforcement. What do you think of that? How long would that stay not corrupt? Yeah. Okay. Did the founders, next slide there, did the founders appoint a secret department to enforce the Constitution somewhere? It's kind of a trick question, actually. It depends how you think about it. Okay. You're getting there. So, the woman to Benjamin Franklin says, well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy? Benjamin Franklin says, a republic, if you can keep it. Who's he pointing to? So, you are the U.S. Department of Constitution Enforcement. This is always how it was supposed to function. I've heard a lot in, like I said, my decade of trying everything and a few more years now, of people with ideas on how we can solve things. And the idea of a department, some oversight, it has to be everybody, or at least a 3% irate, tireless minority, right? Like at least a group of leaders, there has to be a culture where we care about this and we understand why it's important. It has to be everybody or we cannot do it. You cannot rely on voting for your favorite guy. Even Ron Paul and Thomas Massey couldn't pull it off by themselves, right? There has to be a culture. There has to be all of us. Okay? So, this is not supposed to be a shock. The founders knew governments in history break rules. They make up rules on the fly. And they always grow out of control. They had thousands of years of history to see how this worked. It's expected. So they built structure to account for this. Okay, so if it's your job, then how well do you know the rules? And can you apply them to every situation? If you're working on any activist project, are we asking first the constitutional nature of the thing that we're dealing with? This should be our first question, just like it should be our representative's first question. But, it's easy for us to get caught up in headlines and emotions and left, right, breaking us down into parties. George Washington said parties would ruin the nation. So, can you apply them, though? So, if we are not applying constitutional principles first in the way we think, do you really think your representatives, what are the chances that they are? We really have to lead by example and first do the things we expect our representatives to do. If we're not doing it, then we're still in this top-down thing where we voted for somebody and we expect them to figure it all out. If you cannot recognize the actions they're taking as on point, or where they are they 100% constitutional? Are they trying? If you cannot recognize that because you don't have the principles solid yourself, we don't have any business expecting them to do the right thing. We can hope they do. We can hope we have a good king, right? Okay, the bare minimum. If it's your job, how well do we know the rules? These are some interesting surveys. The Annenberg Constitution Day Civic Survey, 66% of adults could correctly name all three branches of government. That is like way less than the bare minimum, though. 17% couldn't name any. First Amendment rights, 77% name freedom of speech, but only 9% could name the others in our first freedoms. And then this Wall Builders survey, 86% of Americans couldn't name the right of petition. 61% don't know about the right to assemble. That was important in 2020. 27% believe students should get punished by teachers for posting on social media. 57% of Americans have never read the Constitution. This is an interesting one. 12% of Americans think the Constitution ensures the right to own a pet. Now, that sounds funny, but there's actually two sides to that one, in my opinion. When you think about it, it's obviously not enumerated. There's not anything in there. It talks about pets. So it's silly that people think that. But what's beautiful about the Constitution, when you master all the principles, you start to, catch on to other things. So I love the 9th Amendment that says we have like 1,000 rights that we can't even think of, and that all those are rights. And if I make it up later and it's a right, it counts. So yeah, you could say you have a right to own a pet, right? But really, we need to go beyond the bare minimum. These are all concepts, right? All these things that we have to understand, or we won't know if our representatives are off. Ex post facto, separation of powers, enumeration, civil control of the military. There's a lot of noise out there sometimes, that is emotional about, the military taking control to fix our nation. Just ridiculous headlines that go around. This is a violation of a principle. We should see these headlines. I think one of the first places where we recognize, once we learn the Constitution and all the principles, we start to recognize headlines. Headlines are these things that try to drive us to believe the wrong way. Okay, so all of those, and once we understand them, we can understand them in theory. Then it's a whole nother thing to apply them in real-world experience and to see them play out and to see what excuses lawyers come up, to see, how someone, a legislator, misunderstood something. I mostly think of city councils because that's who I work with the most now, city or counties. I think if we don't understand all these concepts, we cannot expect them to. And we can't help them when they are sincere and they want to do the right thing. We have to become the repository of all this knowledge so somebody can give advice to their local representatives. And preferably more than one person, because there's a community like everyone here, and they can hear the same thing from multiple places. So takeaway. Benjamin Franklin called the American people to maintain a culture of nullification. That is ultimately what he was saying. I haven't even totally gotten to nullification yet, but we're getting there. Okay, another natural law, culture precedes legislation. So the enemies of liberty understand this, and they fight for the culture first before the law change, before they change the laws in the ways that they want. Because they know ultimately that people do what they think is right, oftentimes. And so it's much easier to, make the laws stick when people already believe in something. So the more we have this culture of constitutional knowledge and understanding nullification and how we use it, then we're pushing the Overton window the other direction. Okay, so let's get into nullification. Okay, 1828 Webster's Dictionary. You guys all know that's the place to go to find the real meaning of words. Nullify, to annul, to make void, to render invalid, and to deprive of legal force or efficacy. So a bad law is nullified when any action is taken that makes that law as if it never happened or is unenforceable. So, if the state of Utah passed a law that blatantly violated some aspect of the state constitution, and then a county commissioner or a city councilman was like, well, I have to do this thing. That is exactly the moment we're talking about. That is the time to shine as citizens to help them. I have seen this a lot where they genuinely think, well, the state said so. I have to. And I'm going to give you an example of where I helped someone overcome that. And the city council was simply able to start going, oh, wait, we don't have to do any of this. Another problem that we have in cities and counties is, again, looking for an authority instead of realizing we are the authority. So it's always, let me ask the county attorney. Let me ask the city attorney. Nothing wrong with their opinion, but they are not the law. They're not even in our constitutional framework. Look, I want everyone's opinion when I have to make an important decision, but in the end, it is my duty, if I'm in an office, to know whether something is right or wrong. Okay, so nullification versus traditional action. This is a slide that contains a paradigm shift. Okay, we're used to this world of voting and running for office and lobbying and writing letters and all these things that we think are fighting for our freedom. And in a way they are, it's fine, nothing wrong with them. Okay, but you have to be balanced and you have to have this other side as well. Okay, so in the traditional method, you're kind of asking people at the top to do the right thing. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. When you do that, you get a win in the end, permission granted, okay, you guys can have your rights back. Okay, fine, we'll open the school, you don't have to wear masks anymore. Okay, you can open your churches again, fine, because you wrote enough letters. There's too many of you, fine, right? Nullification is when you say, I have the right to keep my church open. They can't lock down a religious institution. We're going to keep worshiping. And we saw this happen in 2020 across the nation, right? It's where you just do what is right anyway. And a large majority of the time, you're not challenged. People are left alone. And if you have to, so there's like two squares, and I put the squares because I thought that the squares is where you put your energy, and the circle is where you win, and you get to walk in truth under your natural God-given rights. So one requires all this energy, and sometimes you get the circle. Other times you just walk in the circle. You walk in your truth. You walk in the rights that God gave you. And then if you need to, you can put the energy into defending if somebody challenges you. So paradigm shift there. Okay, let's talk about this word oath, also in the Webster's Dictionary. So the oath of office. All of our representatives take this oath of office. An oath is something, the intention was, it is made with an appeal to God for the truth, right? Or implies that person imprecates God's vengeance and renounces his favor if the declaration is false. So if you say you're going to follow the Constitution and you don't, you have made an oath that you give God the right to imprecate his vengeance upon you if you don't fulfill your oath. So that's in the law. This is our law. It was always the intention that every officer acted according to his conscience, not according to legal advice. Again, I already explained that. You can get advice from everyone, and you should. But in the end, it is up to you whether something is right or wrong. I recently put a lost cat poster up in my neighborhood. And the city threatened a $1,000 fine for putting up a lost cat poster, and they took it down. And we got this angry call from a code enforcer. Called my council person, and I had this discussion, and also the city attorney. And they say, well, this is how we do it. We're not trying to create a public forum and all these things. I said, the streets are a public forum by default, and you're by giving no avenue to express the First Amendment. And I had this discussion, but the council person basically just deferred to the lawyer. She didn't know. I made some decent arguments, I think, and I think she kind of got it. But then she goes, well, let me have the attorney call you, because I don't know. I'm not the expert. Oh, but they are supposed to be the experts. We're all supposed to be the experts, and they're supposed to be a reflection that came from us. Okay, so nullification, how is it legal? The oath of office empowers all representatives to ignore any act in opposition to any law or action that they believe personally violates anything in the Constitution according to their conscience, not a lawyer's conscience. The oath of office is higher law than all legislation. Private individuals are the owners of the constitutional contract. Thus, we have the power to enforce it. So examples, ignoring mandates or attending church during lockdowns. We have the power. Now, I found it's most common in my experience, people try to throw the oath of office in a representative's face or disobeying it. That's, to me, the proper way to look at this is that is their power to do the right thing. When the state says something, or there's federal jurisdiction overstepping their bounds, that is their power. Oftentimes people talked about nullification when I first started talking about this years ago, and they're like, well, where is that written down in law? Right? It's just all here in principle, and you have to see it. They have the power. They call it home rule versus Dillon rule. Have you guys heard that concept? This philosophy of law that basically just says local government rules. But it's right here in the law, in the oath of office, where they promise, they take the power from the people through the Constitution, and they can enforce it. So, quick recap of federalism. We all know this. We have vertical separation of power, and we have a horizontal separation of power. Okay? Proper boundaries, and each branch is sovereign unto itself with the duties that it has. Okay? But here on the, so we'll go to the next slide. Thomas Jefferson said, we take this whole system and we bind it down by the chains of the Constitution where they can do no mischief. How does that work? They can't do mischief. Well, a legislator in Congress writes a law. The executive branch says, you can't do that, not on my watch. Same thing with judicial against executive, state against federal. The idea was that without political parties, each institution would greedily protect its own power, not let someone else step on their power. And that works until parties start overlapping the boundaries. So, the constitutions are the final arbiters on the limits of any government power. It applies all levels of government. Okay, the Constitution is the law for the government. They have to follow it. So, who enforces the law of the Constitution? We already talked about the department in this case, but Thomas Jefferson talked about this. Everyone enforces it. So, lending his voice to Benjamin Franklin on what we're supposed to do about it, a nullification of all unauthorized acts done under the color of that instrument is the rightful remedy. So the color of that instrument is when somebody who got their authority from the Constitution, which is every one of our representatives, acts in a way that they say is because it's in their office, but it's only under the color of that because it's not actually lawful. nullification is an appropriate remedy. It is the appropriate remedy. It's actually the only way that the Constitution stays alive. So, in the boundaries of federalism, I'm going to go back to that chart, you can see nullification is in between the boundaries. That's how this is supposed to work. If we don't have boundaries, nullification doesn't happen. Boundaries are a critical part of a republican form of government. Boundaries, jurisdiction, geographical, however that works. So that's where nullification lives in government. Okay, there's different forms of it. But in government, that's where it lives. We should have people saying no to other people when they overstep their bounds. Okay, so the takeaway there is that nullification keeps the Constitution alive. If you are ever feeling, gosh, why is the Constitution dying? Ask yourself, where do you see nullification happening? And if it's not there, that's why it's dying. And if you want to give it more strength, it needs to start happening more. This was the founders' intended design. Yes?
Going back to your story about the cat.
Yes.
The poster. Were you able to invoke this nullification?
It's a very recent thing, and I don't have a lot of energy. But yeah, it takes work, right? It takes more work to stand on your rights. So in my mind, I could envision how I could make a change in my city. But I'm just like, what's my hill to die on today? That's what it came down to, right? And yeah, one of the things I advocate is that we have to build our house before we have problems. We can't be reactive when problems happen. So during the boring times when there's not an emergency and there's not lockdowns, this is when we study and learn and we build our strength. And I wrote a whole book on that, actually. I would plug at the end. But yeah, so the question was on the cat story. I should probably repeat the questions for the broadcast. Yes?
You said the Constitution, but how does the state Constitution figure in that? I've told some some elected officials that the Utah Constitution is their job description.
Correct. That's correct. The Utah Constitution is their job description. 1,000% correct. It's the same thing. So the Utah judicial, we have separation of powers in Utah. The same branches are supposed to balance each other. I've heard of Orrin Hatch saying, let's just pass it and see what the courts do with it. Right? They know they're passing garbage. And they're just hoping nobody else nullifies it. But the power of our voices, once we start learning this, when you combine, by ourselves, we can nullify, a dumb mask by ourselves. But bigger things requires group effort, requires teaching, requires, little events like this where we learn principles. And so there's definitely like a spectrum of nullification and how those things work. But either way, that's what keeps the Constitution alive. So here's an example. In this law itself, the legislature actually acknowledges they are limited by nullification from other authorities, where they say if any section of this act is held unconstitutional, then the other sections still apply. So they're kind of planning for, we might have wrote something that was off. Or maybe we know we did, but if nobody says anything. But, okay, if you catch us, then the other things we wrote still count. This kind of nonsense is in bills times 1,000 every year in Utah. Okay, now, I don't know if the audio will play. You guys have the audio up there. There's a couple of things that I have an audio clip. But so in 2014, I'll give a preface to this, and then we'll see if the audio will play or not. But in 2014, one of the things that I worked on with Defending Utah and members of the John Birch Society was trying to nullify Obamacare in Utah so that Obamacare couldn't be forced upon us in the state of Utah. And we helped get a bill together where we actually wrote a nullification bill. And then some interesting, shady things happened, and suddenly the entire bill was changed. You can look this up in the Utah legislative history. You can look up the bill. It is actually called Nullification of the Patient, Affordable Care Act. It's like the title is still there, but the bill, they just gutted it and made it about expanding local Medicaid in Utah. They actually implemented a provision of Obamacare by doing that. So in that action, so this is a friend of mine. His name is Bliss too. Some of you may have heard of him, a regional field director for the John Birch Society. He was approached by a legislator, one of the two that was involved in gutting the bill. And so the audio is actually his testimony. He left us a voicemail in his own words of what happened. I guess I can just say it, explain it. But basically, he comes up to him and tells him, you need to tell your people to stop talking about nullification. And he describes how he just poked him in the chest. So that's why I did the graphics. Poked him in the chest, and he said, you need to stop talking about nullification. We got a lot of lawyers here at the legislature. We don't think that's a good idea. So, so another example, I'm going to have a few examples of this. In maybe it was 2022-ish, I wrote this article on facial recognition, and I put up in the article a list of solutions. Whenever I write about problems, I like to put solutions in the bottom as long as I have the energy to put that in there. And one of the things I said is, you can demand your local city pass a nullification ordinance that facial recognition is illegal in your town. Wouldn't that be great? Any county, city can do it. Get rid of this nonsense. Okay, let's move to the. Okay, yeah. So this was the article I wrote, and I kind of highlighted that's one of the solutions there, the bottom of my article. And so then going to the next slide. So going in order, I posted this on this website on Facebook, and I learned a long time ago not to really argue with politicians or lobbyists or people on Facebook, but this day I just felt like I would do it. And it's great because it proves my point. Political insiders hate nullification. It's like they get a training somewhere to poo-poo this concept because they have to kill it because it just destroys the political class's agenda. So he sees the article and he's like, well, since the city is chartered by the state is the superior sovereignty. Where there's a difference in statute, you can bet on the state winning. So then I replied, well, all levels of government answer to the constitutions that protect natural rights. Your statement is only true so far as there are no violations of the Constitution. Where there are, the individual or that city that represents the individual can nullify. So his response, oh, I don't know where you're getting your so-called facts, but I'd stop listening to them if I was you. Nullification has been tried so many times. Oh, it's a dead issue. I wish I would have learned from this guy sooner. I wouldn't be so dumb, right? This happened so much to me in 10 years of activism. They don't like this because it is our power. So a real nullification example. So based on true events in a small town in Utah. I'm going to kind of, go through these. There once was a nice small town where the people liked their way of life. The town had a mayor with a plan. He was related to a real estate developer. They wanted to build high density in a small town. The developer was glad that the mayor was in their family. But there was no free market demand for this high density. So the developer was going to make the taxpayers pay for it later through a PID, or a public infrastructure district, a special district, these fancy tools of government that the legislature tries to create to get around the rules of the Constitution. The city council discussed the plan. Then this city council heard a presentation on how local government can lead the way that I presented. And this is a presentation that I give upon invitation to small towns. After hearing the presentation, the council learned that the Constitution forbids the mixing of public and private money together, or power, money or power, because this destroys the Republican form of government. In fact, they learned it's actually in the Utah State Constitution in several places. The legislature shall not delegate to any special commission, private corporation, or association the power to perform municipal functions. Now, special service districts are something that they're being created like I don't know what's the analogy, but there's just like hundreds, maybe thousands, just in our state. And it is in the Constitution, there is a mechanism to create districts for a purpose, but they have rules so that we don't violate a Republican form. And so this is an example. If a city creates a special district, that district must be governed by the governing authority of the county, city, or town. It can only be a child of that county or city, and it must inherit all the limitations of the Constitution, and it inherits the powers and limitations because it's part of executing, what the city, was going to do otherwise. But the reason it has to maintain that structure, because what do you as the people do when you have a problem with that special district? Oh, right, you start getting past the buck when you go to your city. Well, that's a district. I don't know who's in charge. You need to call so-and-so. And those people are unaccountable to you very often. More and more. This is part of how they are creating a new form of government. I call that micro-regionalism. I have a whole presentation on regionalism on my YouTube channel and website. I go deep on that subject. But it is the shadow government being created right before us in plain sight. Regional governments. Basically private institutions that govern, and then they pass draft law to our cities, and then they just rubber stamp it. So they have a whole structure, like our whole constitutional framework could collapse, and they're good. They've got a whole structure ready to go. They've been building it for 100 years. So anyway, back to the story of the city. So I taught the city these various aspects with what they were dealing with. Okay. Also, let's move on to the next one. The U.S. Constitution talks about every state must maintain must be republic in form. So putting the pieces together, you're starting to realize, hey, this special district thing actually is like a violation. Another aspect is we have this beautiful clause, vastly underused and ignored in our state constitution, that the free market is the law in the state of Utah. A free market system shall govern trade and commerce and to promote the dispersion of economic power. So once you start getting private hands or government hands involved in these private institutions and you start taking away the people's power, you are destroying the free market because now government is paying for this private development instead of the free market. Okay. Also, officers may not profit. So any public officer makes a profit off of public money, not authorized by law, is guilty of a felony. Okay. So private profit with public money or power is forbidden. Another section says something similar. Neither the government cannot lend its credit in aid of any private individual or corporate enterprise. These are very specific things in our state constitution, but they go back to the principles that we're talking about. So if you master the principles, you start to see why certain things are in the Constitution and why they're important. Okay, this town, after learning about this, sent me this gem. They discovered some other small Utah towns that had put this in an ordinance, prohibiting the members of the city council, including the mayor, from private participation in the subdivision process. The border between public and private must be strictly maintained, or we are not a republic. That should be another takeaway, but I didn't put it there. Those boundaries are critical. Regional governments that blend boundaries destroys our republic because they're erasing accountability. Question back there? Sure, the mixing the public and the private markets, correct, is fascism. That's right. Okay, so the city council, after learning this information, knew just what to do. A big fat no. It's that simple. Nullification is just saying no. But what I found, I have another presentation on this. I imagine a timeline where if there's something you want nullified, in the middle of that timeline, there's a brief microsecond where somebody says no to somebody else. But in the timeline, there's a buildup of education and teaching and gathering data before people are ready. Oh, now we get it. Or now we understand what's justified. And you say no. And then afterwards, sometimes you have to be ready to defend that position. But that's the work of liberty. So no. The Constitution was enforced in this small town. And I'm not naming it on purpose, but we've got a few of these. Partially why I say I know there's good people in local towns, especially small towns. That's why I like small towns, right? There was one small town where it was basically a ward calling to be on the city council. It's like they just took turns rotating. It was this tiny little town. So, I would never expect the Salt Lake City Council to have listened to those same arguments. But if you get enough small towns under your belt, you start to create precedent, legal precedent. And movements eventually can't be stopped when they have the right momentum. Okay, another real nullification example. Let's see my time here. How long are we going to? 8 o'clock? Okay. So a real nullification example. So in 2020, I'm going to try to go fast, I guess. Let's go to the slide, the blue right there. Okay, so this is how our government is supposed to work, right? Where enumerated powers, federal is supreme, but state level and city, we are supreme over the federal. Okay, so that is real how it works. But the elite don't like this. And they like to create this illusion of a system. So go to the next slide there. And they create this illusion of a system where it feels like power is coming from the top down. And it does, if we believe it does, where they use media, propaganda, then they use public-private partnerships and people that are not on the side of liberty, who use their influence to say something is real, and then the culture obeys fake laws, even though law was never passed. Okay? So, sorry, there was a lot of animation on this one, so we'll kind of just go through. Okay, so we have this real versus illusion. Go to the next slide. Okay, so we have this real versus illusion concept. Okay, so go to the next one. It says 2020 economic shutdowns. Something that okay, this is really difficult without the animation, but I'll just explain this, okay? So there was never any law passed that actually shut down businesses. The legislature never said we will shut down, but people were obeying. And they used this pattern of media, then the local elite, and then obedience in culture. And this one example, there was this interesting appointment to the Board of Health, an owner of an Indian food restaurant with, does she have any qualifications as a doctor, as a medical practitioner? But she's suddenly on the Board of Health and the governor's economic response task force for these lockdowns. Very interesting, odd appointment, okay? But through the Salt Lake Chamber and these connections, she got appointed. So, next slide, the Utah grassroots group called themselves the Utah Economic Coalition. They spent volunteer time in 2020 they went around to all the Indian restaurants really all the restaurants in Salt Lake that they could. They had a big list, and they were trying to teach people, you have the right to nullify and open. And we had a few really good examples of some success there. But every single one of the Indian restaurants that they went to, so I'll just read this. Defending Utah did an interview with one of their volunteers who explained the difficulty they ran into when this lady had already spoken to these restaurants first. He said, all of these Indian restaurants, about 25 to 30 of them, got a call from her to close their doors on the authority of the health department. and some would not take any action at all if she didn't tell them to do it. So through the Salt Lake Chamber and manufactured influence, even that's temporary, they were able to, let's go to the next slide. Let's see. They were able to follow this pattern. And this is just one example that I had, witnesses and evidence and personal experience from. But this is what was happening all throughout that time. Okay, so culture obeys what they think is the law because they don't know any different. So what we're supposed to do in nullification is the people have the power. Let's go to the next slide there. Next one. Okay. This fake message comes down and people say, hey, mandates aren't laws. We don't have to obey them. That's nullification right there. Okay. So I'm going to try, let's see, because we are, short on time. Okay, actually, maybe we're okay. Okay, so go to the next slide. Nullification in these two systems. Under federalism, nullification is the law and a right. But under the new system that they're building, nullification would become illegal. Your only appeal to what's right and wrong would be your natural rights, which will no longer be technically protected under the law. Okay, so the next slide. There's 3 categories of nullification that I've come up with here. Personal nullification, something you claim in day-to-day living in defiance of someone else's unjust claim upon you. Government nullification is when a government body makes a claim in defiance of another government entity's unjust claim upon them. Community nullification is when the people organize and make a claim together as a group in defiance of any unjust claim the people are responding to. Okay, community nullification is something I talk about with this concept of committees and how the people organize at the local level by leveraging your fundamental rights, your right to assemble, your right to petition for redress, and all these rights combined into a group. It's a way that you can really consolidate your power to take action and to see nullification happen in a community. So that's a book that I have, which I'm happy to email a PDF of for free to anyone as well. So why nullification is rare in government? Okay, so this is why. We have, the green is what we're supposed to have in our government. That's how it's supposed to function. But we have these regional governments that are inserting themselves at all these different layers and across boundaries. And we have political parties. So you have all this mix of loyalty and promises and what is your career path. That's why nullification is rare in government. Okay, so one thing you can do is, let's go to the next slide. Okay, I talk about this concept of assembling new layers, but all that means is, as a people, we have to become the repository of knowledge of how the Constitution works, as we've been discussing. With that, I think communities should start organizations specifically for that purpose. We can have a lot of organizations, for different issues, and that's fine, but there should be one whose sole purpose is to understand and master the concepts of constitutional law and preserve it, and that should be a resource for our representatives. And so in that situation, we can have these organizations that do a variety of things, and I have lots of examples in my book about how that could work. So this is my book, How to Build a Grassroots Organization That Facilitates Nullification in Your Local Community, if you wanted to check it out. Or, again, I'm happy if anyone emails me at info@defendingutah.org. I'll send you a free PDF if you're interested in that. This is a lot of what I do in the American Committees Association, is mentor people that have studied this and are trying to actually apply it. I've helped people nullify in Michigan. I have a few different groups in California, and I've had a few other states kind of try different things on and off. Okay. This was, let's see, this was a fun video. I don't know, are you able to play this video with the audio? Is it possible? Can you try or no? No? Okay, fine. That's fine. Okay, it's a fun video. Dr. Scott Bradley tells this story about when he was lost, and when he was a child. He was 6 years old, and he got lost, didn't know where to go. His parents were gone, and all he knew was he just had to run as fast as he could. And the faster he ran, you know, maybe he'd find his parents. But the problem was he didn't know where he was going. And, right, he was making good time. Where is he going to end up? Okay, and so he learned to, he said eventually he stopped and calmed down and like took his bearings, and this is what we have to do as a nation. Okay, we're lost, but we're running as fast as we can sometimes, but where are we going? Where is our energy going? We have a roadmap. We don't have to come up with new ideas. We don't have to try the UN and try regionalism and try new things. We have a roadmap that was so well thought out that already covered the lessons of thousands of years of history. We just need to stop and master that roadmap and then run as fast as we can. So, yeah, I can just go to the last slide, and then that's kind of all I had, and I can open it to any other questions for the few minutes left here. Yes, Jen? Sure. Yeah, the question is, how are 15-minute cities unconstitutional? This is something I've talked about a lot in my various presentations, so I've done deep dives on this. But in summary, you know, it's not against the law for somebody to build a city, and people can choose what they do in their own town in a variety of ways and all that. But the fundamental reason what makes them unconstitutional is how they're being built and how they're being financed and how you're losing control of them. Okay, so just as much as they are building they've been building for a long time, this new way of regional governance in our nation, they are now putting in the infrastructure under that regional governance. So a lot of the bills that have been passed the last few years, even the ones that haven't been passed, when they're talking about new districts that they're forming, and for the purposes of financing all these crazy projects that they want to build, they often have very interesting clauses in there about how they're going to be governed. And they're basically inching their way into these unaccountable boards. But more specifically, they're making taxpayers pay for these in the future. They're taking public money and they are benefiting private builders. And some of the private builders are caught in the middle or don't really know as much about how government functions. I've been in meetings where I heard Envision Utah sell cities on things. And so the cities would say things like, we can't get the builders to build, they don't want to. Or they don't think nobody wants to buy this way. And then Envision Utah is like, well, we're working on grant programs so they're trying to find out these artificial ways that government money can funnel so that builders actually want to build. And so that is public money being given to private hands. It is a violation of those things I just showed you in the state constitution, for example. So those are some clear examples, yeah? It is a felony for the public officer. So it depends on which side of the aisle, but according to that one line, it talked about public officers. So, I mean, that law is for the government, right? That's the instruction manual for our representatives. So, yeah, by the hundreds, they're committing felonies around the state, if you ask me, if you look at the principle. But yeah.
Sorry, can you go into the characteristics of what a 15-minute city is? Like the traffic calming, not just the high-density housing, but the surveillance and all that.
Yeah, sure. So the idea of the 15-minute city is this vision of the future where you own nothing and you'll be happy. And to keep you in this place where you're going to be so happy, you're not going to have a car. You're not going to be able to leave, and every movement you make is going to be tracked, and it's going to be so cool and convenient. You're going to ride a helicopter to Park City to go skiing. I don't know if you saw that article. And they're going to make it just so future amazing and exciting, but they're fundamentally stripping privacy and rights, and digitally, you know, you're being tracked and monitored every second of your life in these cities. And little by little, some cities are being converted on a scale to 10% of this vision, to 20% of this vision. But the 15-minute city at the point is like they're trying to go all in if they can pull it off, right? Can we get 100% of this vision? They probably want to be the example for the world of how to pull this off. So, okay, yes?
I once was a member of the Davis County School Board, a regional government. So if we don't want regional governments, if we say that they're bad, how do we accomplish their purposes? The regional landfill, the regional sewer district.
Okay,
regional,
that's a great question, yeah. And they're not 100% always not okay. Okay, so the question was, sometimes, I'm kind of rephrasing, but sometimes there's a purpose for governing across jurisdictions, boundaries, for certain purposes, right? Yeah, yeah, there are. At the national level, the founders address this very specifically, where I have, again, a presentation on this, and I might not remember it all, but basically, you know, they talk about how states cannot enter deals with each other without approval of Congress. Okay, so they didn't want states like ganging up on other states and creating alliances and all this kind of stuff. So they said, no, we don't want that. That shouldn't be, you know, in our system. But then they're like, sometimes, so you have like the Colorado River Compact. There's a river that goes through 5 states. There is a natural resource and a legitimate reason for that. So there are some legitimate reasons, but what we are largely seeing is just a blanket, blow away all the boundaries, confuse the people so they don't know who their representatives are, make sure they can't, you take away your right to petition for redress when you don't know who to go to, and everyone plays pass the buck. So, yeah, it's not 100% blanket ban on regionalism, but in my presentation on regionalism, I go over the words. It was like this concept of regionalism was taken to the president, I think in the 1940s, and they said, we can use regionalism to get around the problem of constitutional limitations. They just say it in a White House report. So we have to understand the principles, and we have to be wise to understand situation by situation. So we can't just understand the theory. We have to have experience seeing when it applies in limited situations and when it doesn't. And the overuse of it, which clearly we're way into that.
way for the citizens to maintain constitutional control of those
Sure.
authorized regional governments?
And it should be built into the way that the representatives execute the agreement. They should do it properly and correctly. And then we should be able to recognize when they haven't done it. I think basically if you have one city and 2 cities, they make a deal, each individuals can go to their city's representatives. But when you take half of a city, right, or a quarter, you know, or there's a regional government that goes, you know, over Idaho, they call it the Wasatch, not the Wasatch, Cache County, I don't know, I forgot the name. But, you know, they blend these boundaries to just confuse us, to make it ridiculous. So, yeah, answer your, yeah. Okay, who's next? Go ahead.
So my family lives in Farmington, and the Station Park area, it appears that they are implementing the UN's new urban agenda in that area. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it through public-private partnerships.
Right.
They bought up a ton of land through a company called Stack, And they're
Yeah.
doing that Stack 'em and Pack 'em UN housing
Right.
on that. And
Familiar with Stack, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that's exactly what's going on. And they're just, like, the UN's name is not on it because they're doing it through these public-private partnerships.
So, yeah, and we definitely can't, it's never going to work to go around telling people we have to stop the UN. But all the principles they're applying are constitutional violations. And so that's like, yeah, where we focus. Right, which makes it easy to recognize, ultimately. And you can bet what they are doing is they are funding it through taxpayer money. Because again, there's no free market demand. And these public-private partnerships, they have to just end. They're like regional governments, but they're blending not just government boundaries, but that public-private boundary and all of that. And what they do is when they create these public-private partnerships is they try to play it both ways on us. Oh, we're a public institution, or we're a private, according to their convenience. Like, we don't have to answer to you, we're a private institution. Or, you have to do what we say, we're a public institution. They will just, that's how they play this game. So it is a not Republican in form, and when we are not Republican in form, it is indefensible to exist. That's in the Federalist Papers. Yes?
Go up. If you have a problem with the county, you go up to the state. Or if you have a problem with the city, you go up to county. Or if it's the state, you go up to the federal. Does that make sense?
Case-by-case scenario. You know, wherever someone's willing to do the right thing, I want to work with them, right? But it's case-by-case scenario. If there is a proper constitutional function, that comes from the state down to cities, yeah, the state should be enforcing and cities should be following. But if it's the other way around and the state's doing something outside those bounds, it kind of comes from the bottom up. So it's really case by case. No, case by case. It will make sense sometimes, but it doesn't make sense in the wrong situation, I would say. Okay, I want to go in order. I don't know if there's an order of people, but yes, you actually had your hand up for a while.
So I'm going to go back a couple just a little bit because we've discussed a lot of things. So my question is, when we're talking about the infrastructure of these 15-minute cities and so forth, would you say those really tall cell towers that are being built all over the place, specifically in Layton, is part of that infrastructure? If you've noticed them.
That's part of surveillance infrastructure for sure. Absolutely. And I wrote sample law. I have another website, utahcommittee.us, where I try to create sample documents that if a city wanted to do the right thing, they could take it and use it. And it was a sample nullification of surveillance for a local community. And it's all based upon Fourth Amendment rights and precedent and those sorts of things. So yeah, that is part of the infrastructure. That's a much harder battle because very few people understand that, I think. But there are lots of things that are obvious that people would understand, like facial recognition cameras. We should shut that down one town at a time for public use. They have a facial recognition database where they collect our data without our consent. The government has no right to collect that unless they already have a warrant. That's the law. But they're collecting it in advance, and then they create some random administrative process where then they're allowed to go look up, facial recognition data. That was a state bill a while back. But yeah.
So then, sorry, just a quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
So you said that's a tough battle. Where would somebody start infants, because you got to meet people where they're at to teach them about this stuff.
Right.
Where would someone start when addressing that to, let's say, a city council, for example?
Case by case scenario. This is why I do mentorship. Every city's different. Everyone kind of has a different problem in their area, different culture in their community. So just case by case. You make a plan. You look at how educated your community is. You understand your city council, where they're at, what do they know. Are they deeply embedded in the regional system, or are they just a local farmer that got on the city council to make a difference? And you kind of you have to take inventory of what you're working with, and you make a plan. Yes, Begley.
In the state of Utah, some people think it's state, county, city.
Right.
But the Utah Constitution doesn't say that. it says that states and counties are political subdivisions within the state, and there is no hierarchical relationship. People think there is, but they don't. And now to go back and change that, the cities would throw an absolute fit. And so it will never happen.
What do you mean change what?
To change it so that it's state, county, city in a hierarchical relationship.
As opposed
now it's state and cities or counties, which are political subdivisions.
Oh, so you're saying cities are political subdivisions of the state without counties?
Yes, and our counties.
That might be. I don't know that that's relevant. I think the Constitution applies the same regardless of that structure. But that's interesting to point out. Yeah. Okay.
How does LPR figure into all that?
Say that again.
LPR, license plate readers?
Yeah, you should nullify those in your city before they come.
Do you know how many the FBI has already supplanted around the state?
A lot of them?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's crazy.
But cities have the power. They can pull infrastructure. A city can today say, you know what, we just realized this thing that we allowed, this contract we assigned with a federal contractor to put these in our town, we just realized we broke the law in accident when we did that. They can nullify. It can be done. It's just knowing, just like that small town example I gave. In that town, this city council person, it actually took 1.5 years to fully educate this council before they suddenly clicked and they're like, oh my gosh, we have power. Because they were afraid of a neighboring mayor. They were afraid of attorneys threatening to sue. All the standard stuff you hear. We can't do the right thing because someone will sue us. Nonsense, right? And if they do, great. Let them sue you and you stand on the Constitution for your town if you knew you were standing on the right thing. Okay, do you have another question? You right here?
The towers, who gets to decide where they are put up?
The city council and the mayors. Well, mostly the city councils, because they would vote on that.
They blamed the state government when I asked them.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, absolutely.
They always have them at the grade schools. I mean, who can we,
That sounds like you just described the pass the buck game, right? Which is probably insider political training 101, on how they just don't have to talk to us, right? But a city could say, the state put up a license plate reader here, but you know what? I took an oath and my conscience says that violates the privacy of my constituents. So I'm gonna order these shut down by our city police or whoever. They have the power. Okay, one more question.
Isn't Utah disorganized to where the governor's new grid program to clarify and organize that it's not organized, that the state is out of control? And Spencer's program of grit, of getting everything organized, that we're not organized. Does that make sense?
I think I saw that word once. I didn't read up on it. The grit thing he's talking about. Yeah. To me, that sounds like problem, reaction, solution, where they will sell you solutions, but they got to tell you why they're doing it. So we have a problem. We're not organized. So therefore, go along with what we're about to do. That's what it sounds like to me in that case.
He's got this program where he wants to make it functional rather than dysfunctional, that it must be dysfunctional.
In theory, or he's justifying his solution one way or another. I would need to see the exact details. But if anyone wants to ask me questions later, I'm happy to talk. But thank you so much, Jen, and thank you.
All right, raise your hand if you appreciated that information. Okay, thank you so much, Enoch. And you can see his website. Make sure you're writing that information down. I want to give you an action item of either emailing him for his book or purchasing his book. It sounds like he's done a lot of work. He deserves to be compensated for that. And I can tell your minds are all churning because you're seeing things that you don't like. This discussion is not over. We are going to have a lot more of these discussions, a lot more speakers that are going to help us understand what we can do to nullify a lot of the unconstitutional things that are happening. And our next meeting, which we're going to be talking about AI, Jen Dredge is going to be here. Jen Garner, are you in this room? Okay. I think it's Jen and someone else. I can't remember who, but this whole digital surveillance that we're talking about is a very, very big deal. And we all need to be aware of this so we can stop this from happening. So by a raise of hands, who can be here 2 weeks from tonight? 2 weeks from tonight, is it the 14th? Okay, so the 28th. If you can commit to coming 2 weeks from tonight, and if you can bring a friend with you, we could double the amount of people that we have here, because everybody needs this information. It empowers us to do something about it. So I really am pleading with you to come and to bring someone with you so they can know about it. Did everybody sign our sheet? Okay, I want to give you an example before you all leave. There's been in the news the past week or so about a certain legislator, actually it's the Senate president, whose granddaughter, who was, I believe, 18 years old, raped a 13-year-old. And it was they were going to trial. Well, the lawyer for the granddaughter, who was friends with the Senate president, wrote some legislation that made it so the age, it was not, I can't think of the right word. So it wasn't a felony, right? So that it was okay, even though it was a 13 and an 18-year-old. Well, it's just coming out in the news that he used his political power to pass this kind of legislation. I don't know if this exactly applies with what Enoch was telling us, but certainly that would be an unconstitutional law. So there are so many examples of corruption. There is going to be a rally at the state capitol on Sunday, not my choice, at 4 p.m., where they're going to be speaking out against this if anybody wants to come. The topic is going to be protecting children, and it's going to be calling out legislators that are using their power to make laws that benefit them and don't protect children. And there's a lot of that. Utah has like the highest rape of children of I think almost any place in the nation, if I'm right. Okay, so you have any corrections for what I just said? Who's speaking with Jen Dredge? Okay, just 1 second. Jen Garner, who's speaking with Jen Dredge? Oh, she's going to look it up. It's an AI expert. So you definitely want to come. Brashana? Oh, okay. No, I was asking Jen Garner. Okay. Are there any questions, Teresa? Go to We Are the People. It's We Are the People event. Any other questions? I want to remind anybody who did not walk in, I am doing a honey group order. So it's a preparedness thing. If anyone wants to take part in a group order for raw unfiltered honey, please come and talk to me. John Crofts, you want to come up and introduce? Okay, you want me to? Okay, so you guys know that I already told you one of the things that we do is we are constantly looking people to run for office. We're looking people who are willing to step up and run for office. And if you go back and you look, we just had primary for all of our cities. There were so many people that ran unopposed. There were so many positions that ran unopposed. This is terrible. But we do have Brashana here who ran for Layton City Council. She came really close. And we do want to applaud her for running because that takes such an effort, so stressful. And we have someone else we want to introduce. Will you stand up and say your name?
Whitesides. I live in Syracuse, and I'm going to run for county clerk. What I want to do is bring a better level of transparency, have the clerk's office, again, be the people's office where it's accessible. And really, my biggest concern is our data and our privacy with the current system that has been being used. There was some legislation that went, that was proposed this last legislative session to leave ERIC. Unfortunately, that got stalled in the Senate. So as, you know, running a county clerk, I would, my goal or my promise would be to work with those people to try and get legislation passed so that we can be sure about our security, our privacy, and the way that our elections are run with integrity. So, thank you.
Thank you. So that's John Whitesides. He's running for Brian McKenzie's seat. That's definitely someone we want out. But we could just nullify those things, right, Shauna? Right? Isn't that, Enoch? Is that what we can do in constitutional laws? We can just say, sorry, we're not going to do those things because they're not the right thing to do. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. If you are interested in the honey, just come up here and grab my business card. You can take it home, text me, and I'll send you the information. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you.